The LDS Church promotes certain personal practices by which members live out what it means to be a faithful believer in that context. And these practices have parallels within traditional Christianity, but former Mormons need to learn new motivations for what they do. They might easily take to some of our practices, but they need to learn new motivations, and they need to learn new ways to measure their progress in the faith. So first, to help them, you can help them develop a new scorecard. In Mormonism, it's not hard to know where you stand. Now, in some Christian traditions, the focus is on orthodoxy, believing the right things. And so if you believe all the right things, you kind of know where you stand. But in Mormonism, the focus is on orthopraxy. It's doing the right things. In fact, Mormons classify their own people as either active or inactive. And so the implication is quite clear that it's activity that matters. Attending weekly sacrament meetings, other gatherings, paying your tithing, doing family home evening, fulfilling your callings, going to the temple, whatever those activities might be. And as a former Mormon enters the traditional Christian world, we have a different scorecard. Outward activity is not of the same value. There's certainly good things about being actively involved in your faith, but the specific kind of activities are different compared to Mormonism. And we have a different motivation. And so the former Mormon might be confused about, what am I supposed to do to live out and develop my faith? How do I know when I'm succeeding? And so this is where we need to address the question of motivation. In Mormonism, their activity is driven by the expectation that a person will develop their own personal righteousness to prove themselves worthy of returning to their Father in heaven. But the problem is you can never know if or when you've done enough, and so you just keep on working, keep on doing stuff. And then activity is also motivated, to be honest, by a desire to appear worthy before other church members. So image and reputation become really important. Well, neither of those motivations is any help at all in the Christian life. So we don't obey God or engage in certain lifestyle practices in order to earn anything from God. We're right with God by His grace alone. And also, Jesus warns us against fasting or praying in order to be seen by others. He says that's all the reward you're going to get. And so we want to help a former Mormon identify the motives that drove them in the past and help them come to see that the only motive that really counts is to please and honor God in love and in gratitude to Him. Now, along with addressing their motives, we also need to help them recalibrate familiar practices. Again, there's a number of things that look very similar in the Mormon world and in the traditional Christian world, but they might mean some very different things. So instead of tithing to a church, we teach them how to give to God. Instead of baptism being a way that you join the church in Mormonism, we help them see that they're being baptized into Christ and into an identification with Him and His people. Instead of fulfilling a calling of service in the local congregation because it was assigned to you by the bishop, instead we're going to help them understand that we serve others with our unique gifts and abilities that God has given to us as the Holy Spirit leads. And we help them recalibrate prayer from a religious formality into an intimate conversation with God. We help them recalibrate the sacrament, which is for them a renewal of the vows that they've made to be obedient, to help them understand that communion or the Lord's Supper is a joyful remembrance of what Christ has done on our behalf. Now, one activity that's absent in the Mormon world is small groups, because LDS perfectionism does not lend itself to vulnerability. And so small groups are a great way to pursue God, but former Mormons are not familiar, maybe awkward or uncomfortable with small groups and have to get used to the idea as we help them recalibrate the practices in their Christian life. And ultimately, we want to help them to embrace inward versus outward measures. See, as Christians, we measure how we're doing in three ways. Number one, by comparing our life, our attitude, our motives, and so forth to what God says in the Bible. And then secondly, by listening to the conviction of the Holy Spirit, who lets us know within when we're sinning or walking the wrong path. And then thirdly, by receiving input and accountability from trusted friends in the faith community. It's not by measuring ourselves against the cultural or church-imposed standard of outward activity. And so again, yes, there is activity that expresses our relationship with Jesus, but the scorecard is different. It's more subtle, it's more nuanced, because we're measuring a different thing. We're not measuring our external worthiness or righteousness, but we're trying to help people understand the transforming work of Christ from the inside in our character that then takes shape in our actions.